For Monty Reed, life has always been an adventure. A man of fortune, a decorated Army Ranger, and successful young entrepreneur. Monty was a stranger to defeat until two things happened which sent him traveling down the road of misfortune. Join Monty now as he shares how he turned his tragedies into triumphs and broke the power of death.
Well, I want to thank everybody for taking time out of your busy schedules tonight for coming. Things got really interesting when I was about 7 years old. How many people had a big brother or a big sister, somebody you looked up to? Okay. Did some people in the room, did you have a big brother, big sister that paid you to get away? Well, I was very fortunate. My big brother was not one of those kind of guys. He always invited me to come along. He taught me how to fish, how to ride a bike, all the things that a good big brother should do. Well, when I was about 7 years old, he was 9, he got his first paper route. And he gave me my first job outside of the home. And that was one of those paper routes where it comes Wednesdays. I don't know, anybody get those papers? You wonder who's delivering it? Well, it was once a week, and my brother paid me a dime for that day to work for him. And that was my first job outside of the home. And he was real smart about when he paid me. He waited until the end of the paper route. He gave me the dime outside the candy store at the end of the paper route. And within a couple weeks of shopping at that store, I noticed that the candy at that store was a lot less expensive than the candy at the store in my own neighborhood. So rather than eat the candy, I brought it home. And I sold it to the other kids at a discount, and I made a profit. So that was my first business. And it was kind of neat because at an early age, just 7 years old, I learned the difference between the money you earn from a job and the money you earn from your own business. And I knew that someday I was going to have a business of my own. I wasn't sure exactly what it was. I even experimented with writing out business cards, you know, and it was a lot of fun. Later, when I was old enough to have my own paper route, I'd get home from school and then I'd go work hard. Your paper route's treated like your own business. I'd work hard at my own business. And then after, rather than go home, I'd go down to the docks because I'm originally from Montana, but growing up in Seattle, there's a lot of boats out here. And we noticed that all these marinas, these docks, in fact, there's some of these clubs that are so fancy, they don't even use the word boat. And I remember going to this one place and looking at a funny looking sign, and I see these huge boats, so big they don't call them boats, I don't know, 70 feet, 60 feet, 100-foot things, and I wonder, man, what kind of a person would actually be able to get on one of those things, let alone be able to own one? And I sometimes would hang out there for hours, and then I'd catch a glimpse of them. And then when they'd come up, you know, up the dock, I'd want to talk, excuse me, and I'd say, how do I get a yacht? And I had to ask so many times before somebody finally walked up and he said, son, it's pronounced yacht. So if you can imagine, 12-year-old kid, excuse me, how do I get a yacht? You know? And the ones that would talk to me, they told me about they own this business or they own that business. I remember this one gentleman, he says, look across the water, son. He says, you see that tall building there? I own it. And most of the people that work there work for me. And he said, if you want to have a yacht, you need to own a business. And so for me, you know, it kind of like a reinforcement. Planted some seeds at an early age that maybe a business would be a better way to go. Well, in high school, I had decided that I wanted to be a marine biologist and I was going to work for Jacques Cousteau. Anybody have one of those kind of dreams when you're a kid? You know, you're going to do something like that, astronaut or one of those things. And but an interesting thing happened. It was kind of sad for me and tragic. In high school, I had a lot of problems with tests. I had a lot of problem with math, and numbers were backwards, and I couldn't spell right. And at the time, they didn't do a lot of testing for learning disabilities. And anybody know somebody who's had a learning disability? You know, at that time, they didn't really say anything about that or do any testing. It's just when it came time to talk to the college counselor, they said that college is just not in your future. And that kind of crushed my dreams because I wanted to, you know, be a biologist and couldn't do the math, so that wasn't going to happen for me. And I knew that my friends in high school, they were either going to get out of college and get a job, or they were going to go straight out of high school and get a job. Well, I didn't want to just do that. I wanted to make a difference. I wanted to do something special, something important where I could leave a mark. Well, in high school, after finding out college was not my future, I remember I was watching the news, and there was a story about something tragic that happened in Europe. There was a car bomb that went off, and it killed a bunch of innocent people. And I remember paying attention to this because it seemed really strange to me, and that's when I started learning about these things they call terrorists. Well, at that time, something inside of me just snapped. And I went downtown Seattle to the military recruiters, and I interviewed all of the Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines. I walked to every one of those places, and I looked at the people, and I said, look, I want to fight terrorists. And they looked at me and said, you're crazy. But you hold the pen, we'll move the paper. And the Army recruiter, he knew just the same thing to say to me. He said, you're crazy, but we know just the place for you, Airborne Rangers, Fort Lewis, Washington. And he even actually took me down there to meet some. And after talking to him, I knew that's exactly what I was going to do. Anybody ever heard of the Airborne Rangers? You know, a bunch of crazy guys. Who would be crazy enough to jump out of a perfectly good airplane? That's part of the job. And well, anyway, I joined up. I went to the training, and I was stationed. I had a 4-year contract. I was stationed at Fort Lewis, Washington, but of course we hardly ever spent any time actually in Washington because you're always going somewhere. And I was doing a low-altitude parachute jump as part of my job. They called it a combat simulation. It was the 3rd year that I was there. And anybody ever seen sailboat races? And you see that it's just real close, and one sailboat comes up and it steals the wind from the sails, and the sail collapses, and then they just go right on by. Well, you know, that kind of a thing can happen with the military parachutes. And this was on my 39th jump. I used to tell people that, or 39 good jumps and 38 good landings, because somebody's parachute came underneath mine. And at about 100 feet off the ground, it took all the air, so the parachute closed. You fall a lot faster when it's closed. And so you hit the ground about 75 or 80 miles an hour. And I'm lucky to have survived. And they shipped me off to a hospital down in California. And I was there for about a year. And when I finally got out, I couldn't work a regular job because for me it hurt to breathe and walking was a problem. And I couldn't find any jobs where you could lay down. I had friends of mine who said, hey, go find a mattress testing job. Anybody you ever call mattress factories and they hang up on you? They didn't think I was serious. You know, I want to work hard, but I can't sit. You know, it was very frustrating. They didn't have that ADA thing, Americans with Disabilities Act. They didn't have that 11 years ago. And boy, it was rough. But unfortunately, I had a good friend of mine, and he'd owned his own business for many years. Had a little convenience store. And I always like to tell people, I won't tell you the name of the store, but it was all the Slurpees I could drink. And he had the store, and he said, look, I need somebody to count the money and do the books. And he said, job description does not require you sit in a chair. He said, I got a pillow right here. You can lay on the floor. I'll teach you how to count the money and do the books. And anybody, if you've ever met Roger, I think Roger's just an awesome guy. He came along right at the right time. Anybody ever have angels come into your life? You know, just somebody gives you something when you need it? Well, anyway, for a year and a half, I worked there. And I didn't want to stay there forever. You know, laying on the floor, it was work, but it was basically a job. You got to eat something. And so I saved my money, and I started saving up. And after about a year and a half, I'd saved up $500. It's not a lot of money, but I wanted to own my own business because I remember those seeds that were planted when I was a kid. And anybody ever looked into how much it would cost to start a retail business? You know, we're not talking $500, are we? We're talking a lot more, thousands. And anyway, I didn't have the money to put into inventory or into a storefront, so I put all the money into advertising and catalogs. And I worked really hard. I spent a lot of time talking to people and just worked really hard. And actually, the 5th year in business did $500,000 in sales. I had a retail store, had several employees, and it just looked like there was no end in sight. And you know, I figured the doctors told me I was going to hurt forever. And I figured if I'm going to hurt forever, I'm going to work real hard the first part of my life and spend the rest of my life hurting, but at least I'd be relaxing on a beach somewhere. And, well, anyway, a little problem happened with it. There's an aircraft manufacturer in this area, starts with a B, and they employ a lot of people. Anybody know somebody who works there? You remember about 4.5 years ago, they were handing out all those pink slips? And, you know, it was kind of sad. About 10,000 people got laid off. And the problem was most of my customers either worked there or they knew somebody who did. And even if they weren't the ones getting laid off, they were afraid they were going to be next. So they still come into the store, ask all the same questions, but they weren't buying. And the 6th year in business, we'd done it, remember, in the 5th year did $500,000 in sales. The 6th year did $70,000. And that was devastating. I had to let all the employees go, and I was trying to pick up the pieces. You ever seen in the circus the guy spinning the plates? And he's running around doing it? Anybody ever do that with your bills? No, he's not here, you know. They come knocking on the door, total stranger. No, sorry, Monty's not here. He's in the Peace Corps. He's in Africa. I'm his twin brother, you know. I didn't know he owed that money, right? Well, anyway, it was, you know, we always tried to pay everybody a little bit, always. And at the time, when we closed the store, I had to let my manager go, and he actually had been working with me for 5 years, a real good friend of mine, I thought. And had an accountant come in, check the work, the books, and found that the gentleman had a very creative accounting method. And it was, one for the store, two for me, one for Monty. It was very sad because at first glance there was over $36,000 missing. And it turns out that was part of the reason we lost everything. I ended up closing the store, and the attorneys told me, hey, you can file that deal and start over 7 years from now. I said, sorry, I wasn't raised that way. I borrowed the money, I'm going to pay it back. Yeah, people say it was his fault, whatever. No, it was my fault. My name's on the license. I should have learned it's a school of hard knocks. And it was over $257,000. And, I made a deal with all the creditors. There was actually two people that were really mean. I owed one $7,000, the other $10,000, and they wanted their money now. They're going to, come take stuff. And it was really rough because they forced me to close the store and sell everything off. And it was really sad, but I made an arrangement with all the rest of them, because they're all nice, that if they would stop compounding the interest, that I would make payments and pay it all back. And I thought, maybe it'll take the rest of my life. But that's okay. That was a choice I made. And I took a job, closed the store, took a job, and started working, and wouldn't you know it, add insult to injury, I fell out of a chair onto a hard tile floor. I was just reaching for a garbage can, chair went out from under me, and hit my tailbone, and the next day I couldn't get out of bed. Well, anyway, 8 months after that, I got a phone call from a friend of mine. And she said, it sounds too weird for me. I'm absolutely not interested. Beverly told me all about it, but why don't you give her a call? So I did. How many people know Beverly Ford? You ever met her or seen her? Beverly's a neat lady. And I went over to her house, and this guy was coming from Eastern Washington. This is a little group of people in her house. He demonstrated all this stuff, and we bought everything. Actually, Beverly and I signed the application the same night. She became a distributor the same night I did. But she got real smart and did the business, and I kind of went out to save the world retailing products. Anybody ever do that? Buy a bunch of stuff. I started using the products myself that night, and I saw, they said you could buy it at retail, you could buy it at wholesale, and they even had these packages you could actually get for less than wholesale. Well, after owning a retail business, there's no way I was going to pay retail. Wholesale, and if I could get it for less, I bought the package, and that's what I did. I basically got those and used them myself, and after about 3 days, I felt real good. Well, an interesting thing happened with the business, too. I wasn't really looking for a business. I just wanted my health back. Anybody know somebody that's hurting so bad that they couldn't even think about a business? They just need to get their health back, And for me, I was hurting financially, too. So when they said there was a business attached to it, I was like, yeah, sign me up. I could use the money. I need it, definitely. But what I did is I just told everybody I knew I had the stuff and wanted them to try it. And some people, they came to my house in the first month. People just come into my house, because I was still starting to recover. People came to my house and say, I'm taking this home. They don't even know what it's called, or they don't care how much. And so I found out that one set of everything wasn't enough. I actually ordered 4 more sets of everything just to keep up with the retail customers. And the first month, there was over $10,000 volume in my business. And this company sends you, at that time, they sent you a letter saying, congratulations. I guess there was only a handful of us at that time. But then the next month, all those people, they brought 2 or 3 people by my house and said, hey, then other people started calling up and said, hey, could you come to our house? We're going to get some people together. And then I started going all over, and up and down in Arizona and up in Canada, all over the place, doing these wellness previews. And fortunately, when I first signed up, I asked that gentleman from Eastern Washington, hey, what should we do? He said, well, you get signed up, order what you want, and then there's a distributor training in 1 week. You got to go to that. So we signed up. We went. I didn't know where I was going to get the money, but I went to it. And the money got really nice. The first month, the company sent me a check, not the retail commissions. I got to keep that right off the top. But they sent a bonus check. That's what they call it. And that's residual income. In my second month, 60 days into it, I got my entire investment back out of the business. My retail store, 3 years I worked putting every penny back into it. It wasn't 3 years until I was actually able to take some money out and use it for something other than the business. I'd never seen anything where 60 days into it, you get your full investment. Now that's, it's not a promise, right? I'm not making a claim about the income. That's just what happened to me. And, they say the size of your effort is going to determine the size of your bonus check. So I did something you should never, ever do in any business, especially not network marketing. I took 30 days off. I rented an RV. I even went fishing in the mountains in Montana for a week and, took the whole month off. And when I got back home, there was this check. It was in the mail, and I opened it up. And there was a check there. Now, keep in mind, I had spent, I was up in the mountains, fishing, and I got this check. And I thought, did they make a mistake? You ever get one of those checks? Oh, should I tell anybody? You got this urge to run to the bank and cash it, and then call them up, right? Well, I figured better find out what this is all about. And they said, you know, that's what we call residual income. And you know, I'd never heard of the residual income. I mean, the first time I heard of residual income, I was like, what is that? Well, it's basically like a royalty. You know, somebody writes a book, and they get paid every time they sell a book. You know, somebody cuts a record. Every time they sell that record, you know, they make some money. And basically, the difference between residual income and regular income is regular income, you sell your time for money, right? So you work, get paid, work, get paid, work, get paid. But in residual income, whatever it is, you work, get paid, get paid, get paid, get paid, and it just keeps coming in. You get paid, get paid, get paid, and it's not anybody. How many people have experienced that now? Isn't that nice? I mean, you can take the month off or a week off or whatever, and you work harder, you get paid more. I mean, that's just incredible, that residual income. I mean, it was something that you know, any business owner that I talked to, they're like, wow, you know, they would love to have that. For me, that was pretty exciting, and the business just started to grow. Well, one of the things that I found was really incredible about the business opportunity, about 4.5 years ago when I closed down the retail store, the debt was a total of over $257,000. And I had been told by many people, including the attorneys, to, you know, file the thing and start over 7 years from now. And I told them, no, I wasn't raised that way, I was going to pay it back. And so I started working hard, doing everything I could, and started paying it. The business opportunity is so incredible that in less than 3 years, the company paid so much that that debt of $257,000 is now completely paid off.
Is debt holding you hostage? Break the power of debt in your life. Look closely at this opportunity. It could be what you've been looking for. To find out more information, contact the person who loaned you this tape.